Hi, this is the second in a series of video where I'm talking to my graphic novel students about how to complete their annotated bibliography assignment. In the previous video, I talked about how to find good sources, and in this video, I'm going to talk about how to annotate them. And what I've done to prepare for this is I've completed an annotation of an article. So I can show you the process and talk about what I did and show you the example, like the finished result. Should just take a minute to show you this. So the article I'm looking at is called Chick Tracts, Monstrosity, and Pornography. It's by Anastasia Ulanowicz, who is writing this article in the journal Image Text. This is an open access journal, so I can view it here. And what I did is I read the article. I timed myself out of curiosity. It took me about 40 minutes to read the whole article, and as I read it, I took some notes. I had a text document open where I just wrote a couple notes, but mainly what I did as I read it is I used hypothesis, and you don't have to use hypothesis, but I like it. It helps me kind of keep track of what I'm reading and helps me remember things or note things that I might want to look at or think about later, possibly quote later if I wrote a response to this article, for example. So as I went through it with hypothesis, what hypothesis lets you do is highlight something and it shows up as highlighted now in my web browser. You can also add a note on it. I didn't in this case. I just highlighted for everything in here because that was good enough for me. But as I went through, I was mainly looking for really strong statements or really clear summaries of arguments that were expressed in larger sections, if that makes sense, and really kind of finding things that I think are the author's central points and main pieces of evidence as she's constructing this argument. So it's a really interesting article. I found it, I learned a lot, I was interested in it. Chick tracts are something that I know about and have been interested in for a while. I grew up in the South, and so I certainly saw them around, and my friends we would enjoy looking at them and making fun of them often. I've read a couple books about chick tracts. I don't think I have any, but they're these fascinating little weird comic books, and certainly express a very specific form of evangelical Christianity, and so they're these interesting textual artifacts that people collect, sometimes to enjoy them ironically, and sometimes to deploy them strategically, because some people believe that these are actually work to convert people. So I'll take a look at the article. The article is written, it gives you this introduction, and the introduction kind of concludes with the thesis, and that's a structure here that you see often, right? So ultimately then a study of chick tracts as well as a comparative analysis of chicks issues and pornographic comics such as Tijuana Bibles places into relief both the excess and the sadomasochistic pleasure that informed religious fundamentalism and its role in the American cultural imagination. So she's done a lot to build up to this, but right there we can see where this article is going. This is really the roadmap to the rest of the article. It's a study of chick tracts and comparing them to pornographic comics such as Tijuana Bibles in order to extract an observation about religious fundamentalism from this wider sense of American cultural imagination. So that's the insight, that's the point, that's the so what of this article, and we're giving it to it. We get it right here. Okay, so this first section is about is a heading with about visual rhetoric. We see some examples from chick tracts. Then here's a discussion of monstrosity and the way that monsters show up. Basically, there are these kind of odd comics with the devil shows up frequently. Satan literally shows up frequently, and he often has pointy, horns and everything. So this is kind of analyzing and studying specific works and kind of how they work. This is comparing them to caricature art, and I think there's some interesting things here. Like here's the article, the comic about global warming. This is evil Al Gore creating global warming, as a hoax. So anyway, then here's this section on pornography. This is an interesting one, and this was a surprising argument to me, but it's interesting because she compares chick tracts, or she reads chick tracts through the lens of what Linda Williams has called the body genres, and that was interesting to me. And so especially this part here, that body genres like horror and pornography depend on mimesis. As the viewer, you are supposed to experience the same things physiologically as characters that you see on the screen. either fear or arousal. And in this case, what's really interesting is that she's noticing that the same thing happens, the same logic occurs with chick tracts, except the mimesis there is meant to be salvation. Like we're supposed to be repentant and saved through that repentance. And so that's a similar kind of relationship between the reader and the work. Really interesting argument, and I find it compelling given the evidence here. Anyway, I'm just kind of showing you through the article. This is what I read as I was reading. Again, it took 30-40 minutes. Yeah, the sublimation and disavowal of erotic pleasure is where she ends this article. And a really interesting observation just about anxiety about sexuality that is pervasive in fundamentalist culture. And so that's something that exists outside of this article that she draws a connection to through chick here. So really interesting. And if you want to know more about chick tracts, I believe the website is just chick.com, although that's a risky one just to type in on a video. Let's see if that is. Yeah, it is. Okay, so if you want to learn more, many of them are available on here. Many of them, I should say, are offensive, and you may, some of the most offensive ones are no longer available, but they are interesting. Okay, so here's what I did. After I read the article, I went in, oh yeah, and you see my search field there. There's an interesting side note about class conflict and leftism, which is pretty interesting, but it was kind of a minor point. So here's what I did. After I read this, I kind of thought about it for a little bit, and just like telling you about it just now in this video helps me kind of organize my thoughts even more. But the assignment for the class is to write an annotation or a note about this article or the articles that you find, of course, that answers some of these questions. And these are questions, you can answer these questions just directly, or you could think of other questions perhaps, but this is the kind of thing I want you to make sure you notice so that you can tell us about them in your annotation. So after I read the article, thought about it a little bit, I wrote some notes, and I did this. I like to do this in Sublime Text because it's just a basic text editor. And let me make this a little bit larger here. And the idea is I literally just copied in those questions from the assignment and wrote what I thought. So I think the article is a study of Jack Chick's comics, focusing on these books' similarities to pornography and underground comics through the lens of monstrosity as a design pattern that unites both. Right, so that's kind of my quick version of like the topic statement for the article. Here we're talking about several of the arguments as I just narrated to you. The main argument is that the illicit evangelical message of these comics demonstrates fundamentalist ideology, but the packaging, distribution methods, and artistic styles have more in common with pornography than would otherwise appear to be the case. So I'm kind of going through some of the major strokes of her argument. The relationship to pornography through the idea of the body genres. The issue about class I thought was pretty interesting, so I made a note about that. I also included a quote from the article because I thought that did a good job of that. I thought was a pretty interesting observation. So then the next question is, how might it be useful for further study? I think so. In this class, we just finished reading My Favorite Thing is Monsters. There aren't a whole lot of essays out there already about My Favorite Thing is Monsters directly, but if that's something you wanted to write about in your final project, you might find this article about chick tracts kind of useful because of the way it talks about monstrosity, and monstrosity as a figure within these comics, or a way of understanding these comics, might provide an interesting way to view the idea of monstrosity as it appears in My Favorite Thing is Monsters. So I don't know, but I certainly offer that as something to read. I should note that this article actually comes from a special issue of Image Text that was all about monsters, and so you might find another article in that same issue that had that is similarly helpful if that's something you want to write about. And then finally, just anything else we should know about it. Just basically, this is a good introduction to chick tracts. If you've never heard of chick tracts before, this is a good place to start, and it includes several examples. But without sensationalizing it, I think it does not. I think the author of this article does a good job of not kind of going to some of the more outrageous comics, because they're sort of distracting, and they are kind of entertaining, I guess, in the sense that it's sort of outrageous to see some of them. One of them is, for example, they're anti-Semitic, Islamophobic, homophobic, like all the things that you might expect. I'm not even going to talk about some of the examples, but it's a good study because it doesn't kind of give in to the sensationalizing of those, because those are, of course, interesting and problematic, but really getting to the heart of it is it's better to look at more commonplace, more typical Czech tracts, as Anastasia Milanovic does here. So these are the notes, and then that's hopefully helpful. This is what I did. This article, this whole process took me about an hour to read the article, put some thoughts together about it, and then to write these notes. And these notes are then what I would be contributing to, and I will contribute to our Zotero bibliography. But I'll show you that process in the next video because I'm trying to keep these separate. So hopefully that was helpful, and thanks for watching. Bye.